Welcome back, Beans Army, to another episode of the Less is More Sports Podcast, the college offseason podcast where we're for the fans, by the fans. Matt and I are here to talk about some of the best players that decided to withdraw from the NBA draft and return back to school. Before we get started, Matt, you got to say anything?
Say anything on behalf of myself or because of that pirate thing we tried last week or
Yeah,
what?
whatever you want. I mean, floor is yours.
All right. So instead of doing that, how about we talk about the history of.
Nope, you're done. Just
Oh,
kidding. Go ahead. No, I'm just kidding. Go ahead.
we're going to talk about Heinz ketchup for an hour. Man, it was going to be great.
Heinz ketchup.
Yes.
Is ketchup the best condiment to put on fries?
That depends on the context. What restaurant am I
Smart
in?
answer. Smart
What
answer.
restaurant am I at, Les? What restaurant am I at?
What fries? What seasoning is on the fries? All good, all
What
valid
kind of
questions.
fries? Are they waffle? Are they potato wedges? Are they crinkle cut?
Oh my gosh, you're gonna make me want fries after this.
Well, some restaurant in Louisville is about to get very lucky because Les is going to go in there and order like the mega fries
Yeah.
with the
You caught
cheese.
me like mid drinking my water, so I was like not prepared to give an answer for this
You're
split
fine. I
second.
knew you weren't. So I can just see it now. You're just going to get the bacon and the cheese on them, load them up, call it a day.
Dude, one of my favorite meals to get. That reminds me of one of my favorite meals to get at a fast food. I don't eat a lot of fast food anymore. I can't anymore. I'm getting old. The weight doesn't come off like it used to. But what am I talking about? The weight never came off. I mean, I played two sports in high school and I still had to watch what I ate. Anyways, point of the story is that made me think of one of my favorite fast food meals, which is the Wisconsin Butter Burger and the cheese fries at Steak and Shake. If you
Oh,
haven't had that, you're missing out.
when you said Butterburger, I thought you were going to Culver's because I'm a
Right.
Culver's guy. I admit it. That's one of the few like non Yum brand McDonald's restaurants we have around here. So it's like I love going to Culver's and just getting the Butterburger because it's so much better than a what is that thing called? Big Mac. That's what it's called. I
Yes,
never liked Big
100%.
Mac.
Oh,
I hate.
Culver's burgers are way better than McDonald's.
I just never got Big Macs, and I don't really like the quarter pounder, but I will do McNuggets.
I,
If
w-
I'm
I
gonna
gotta
get
say, there was
McNuggets,
a Culver's, literally an exit before my office when I worked at the Sentinel News, and it was dangerous.
I can imagine. Les is going to eat all the frozen custard.
There is a reason I gained a bunch of weight when I was a sports writer.
Damn you, concrete mixers. Why do you have to be so good and have such a weird name?
It was between the Culver's that was an exit away. There was a Cinnabon that was also an exit away, and then there was
Oh,
an Arby's literally right across the street, walking distance from the office.
and they have fries.
And they have fries, and they have it was for the Arby's. It was the shakes that got me.
Really? I've never had an Arby's shake. I got to
Never
be
had a.
honest.
I'm gonna take you to Arby's to get a shake.
We're going to film it. It's going to be a podcast
They're gonna be
episode.
like, "Welcome to Arby's. We have the meats." It's like, actually, we want the shakes.
We want the cows that don't make the beef.
We want the other cows, right?
We want the other cow. Thank you very much.
Oh man,
Um,
you gotta love it. We're actually getting way off topic here, but
That's
that's
what we
okay.
always do. That's what we do.
I know. But anyways, so I guess the first question I have for you, Matt, is with all these players that have decided to not go into the NBA draft and come back to school, what player do you think is the best that is coming back to school?
Les, this is a very hard question
For
because
sure.
it comes back to the thing I've been thinking about ever since you said we were doing this topic. And I went through the list of guys who are coming back, which is a lot of these dudes who are coming back. It's not like some things where it made or break where it makes or breaks a season. This is really just the rich got richer, if we're
Hmm.
going to be honest. Because I mean, I'm going through the list and it's like, well, who is the best player? And it's like, well, I look at Alex Condon, a guy who I think people were underrating, and it's like, well, even if he stayed in the draft, you still got Xavier Lee and Boogie Fland. I look at Atega Owe, and it's like, well, he's very impactful, but at the same time, Kentucky runs like 14 guys deep already. He's a great player, but Kentucky wasn't going to be in any issue anyway. So it's like, who is the best guy who entered the portal who's coming back? Because it's like,
Or enter the draft and come back.
enter the draft and come back,
Yeah.
whatever.
As much
Sorry.
portal as much portal as we talk about on the show, it's very understandable.
There's all kinds of things going on. So, I thought about this for a long time. And I think in terms of like pure impact, this name might surprise you. The guy I'm going to go with is having like maybe not the best player, but the most impactful player and making it the best move would probably be Nate Bill going back to Oregon.
Nate Biddle?
Yeah, Nate Biddle. Because, I think, like I said, when I look at Otega Owe, when I look at Alex Condon, when I look at LeBaron Filan, when I look at Tahad Pettiford, they're all amazing players, probably better than Nate Biddle. But like I said, those guys are all going back to the programs where they're going to have an impact. They're going to be great players, but the team was going to be okay without them. But Nate Biddle, I think, was a heart and soul of a very good, overachieving, unexpectedly very good Oregon team last year, who's only going to get better. And I think getting a guy like that back makes a big difference, especially when Oregon hasn't had too many flashy signings or stuff like that. So I'm going to go with Nate Biddle as like a weird, unexpected answer for this because when I look at him, I see a guy who was a heart and soul of a team last year that did some things people weren't expecting, who isn't going back to just, the rich are getting richer, situation. I think when you can it's like they say, sometimes the best gets are the one you already have. I think he's a really good example of that. So I'm going to go with Nate Biddle. Not necessarily the best in the sense that we're thinking of it, but in the sense of that's going to help the school the most going forward.
I like that answer just because it made me think of another angle I could go on this. As far as the best, I think is Tahad Pettiford. I think he's going to be one of the most electric players in college basketball this year. I mean, just being the Duke fan on this podcast, going back to the game where we played against Auburn, we did not have a problem with Janai Broome. He got his numbers, but he had to work for every shot, and he consistently built them through the course of the game. But Tahad Pettiford was the guy that came in off the bench that we did not have an answer for. Now I think with him coming back, you move him into that more full-time starting role, and he's going to be able to have more tape to show like what he can do. And let's be honest, the only reason that he's coming back in the first place is because he's short.
Yeah.
And that's what he's even said. He wants to come back to show that his size does not matter. He can play, and I'm one to agree with that. I mean, this is a complete scoring combo guard, one of the shiftiest players in college basketball, could take you off the dribble, three-level scorer, absolute bucket, and an absolute spark plug that could ignite any offense. So Tahad Pettiford was my best player. But since you went with the more impactful player, I actually disagree, but that's why we have this podcast, because it makes for great conversation. I actually think Otega Owe is the most impactful returning player. And the reason being is because with Otega Owe, I see an NBA caliber player. I look at what Lou Dortz is doing for the Thunder right now, and I see Otega Owe, once he finally gets to the NBA, having a similar role to that. But with Owe, the reason I think he's so impactful is because, let's be honest, Kentucky hit the portal hard this year. They brought in a lot of new guys. And with Otega Owe being one of the key players on last year's team, he gives them an opportunity to have a player to come in and have that familiarity that Mark Pope needs to establish that culture with the new guys and then, ignite them for the season going forward.
I would agree with that. Uh, like I said, Otega Owe was just hard for me to say because I want to give the spotlight to a guy not a lot of people are talking about. My honorable mention was actually Josh Hubbard from Mississippi State
That's a good one.
because Mississippi State lost a couple guys this season, but he was once again the engine on a very, very well run offense machine. And anytime you can get a guy like that to come back, especially with those kind of prospects in a very, very tough SEC, I would also go with him. So my top three would probably be Nate Biddle, Otega Owe, and Josh Hubbard in that order. But like I said, I'm looking. I took this question as to be looking more for guys who, if they don't come back, and we'll talk about a team like this later, it could totally change the fortunes of where your program is even, or where your season, maybe your program is even headed. But we'll talk about that later. We'll talk about that later.
In
But
your defense, I asked a very vague question to
no,
start the podcast.
that
Starting easy, well, starting simple sounding questions and then working our way up.
I've got those galaxy brains too. They just always end up playing in my head. It's like, what's the most esoteric answer I can give here?
Yeah, that's why we love you, Matt.
All right.
All right.
I was expecting you to ask me another question. Now I don't know what to do.
No, I didn't know if you were wanting to go another question or if you
Well,
had
I'm
more to
ready for
say.
this.
All right,
Go
fair
ahead.
enough. We're gonna dive right in. We're gonna
Let's
dive
dive
right
right
in.
in. Damn it.
With a lot of these players coming back to college basketball, one of the main reasons is so they can improve their draft stock for next year, right? And so, with this being said, what player do you think has the best opportunity to come back to college this year and improve his NBA draft stock the most?
Now you ask me this question, where the answer, like you said, is Otega Owe, in my opinion. Like you said, I don't know if he reminds me to a T of Lou Dort, but he's just such a high energy guy with a lot of athleticism that I think another year playing in college, another year with Pope, another year with like new teammates, with a bigger leadership role. Not that he didn't have a big one last year, but another team, another leadership role, more chances to prove that in the tough conference. I think Otega always got the most to prove here. If I had a secondary choice, hold on, I've got a list right here in case you asked me about this. Guys who came back to improve the most. I would honestly say, once again, a guy I talked about in that first segment, Alex Condon of Florida. I mean, he's still such a raw talent. I think if he continues to work on his game down low, I know big men aren't what they used to be, but I think his experience with, like, what was he, an Australian rules football player? He's got that toughness to him. And I mean, if Zach Edey can work in the NBA, which I didn't expect that. I think Alex Condon can too. I think he's got a really good defensive motor. I think if he continues to improve and learn the game of basketball, he's going to be just fine. And like I said, the biggest problem with Pettiford is like he can't grow. But I would say Otega Owe and Alex Condon would probably be the two guys I would look at who could go from coming back to school because they don't like the NBA prospects to, hey, welcome to the NBA next year. You improved to the point of something like that. And I know people are going to say Boogie Flan, but I got nothing against him or anyone like or anything like that. But I just don't know. When you go to Florida and you play with all those great players, you may get overshadowed, and that's what I'm afraid of, especially with Xavier and Lee in that backcourt.
Speaking of overshadowed,
Oh Lord.
yes, you are gonna love where I'm going with this one
Oh,
because like your worst nightmare is about to come true because you know with this question you open the doors for me to just stand one of my teams to no end, and you know it's coming now. The player that I think has the best opportunity to improve their draft stock is,
Isaiah Evans.
of course, Isaiah Evans, Mr. Showtime Slim himself. People forget this was a legitimate five-star top 10 recruit, one of the best scoring prospects in this class, was actually the second highest rated recruit on that Duke program last year because, technically Man Man was part of the NBA Global Academy. He wasn't in the official recruiting rankings, allegedly. Um, it's a weird dynamic that only recruiting fans understand. But he was the second highest rated Duke recruit last year, only behind Cooper Flag. This guy was an absolute bucket and a North Carolina high school basketball legend. And the fact is, we saw Slim in such limited roles last year that he was basically had such a short leash that he was either to come in and be a spark plug or he was pulled early. Now, this year, with a bigger role, we're going to actually be able to see the full scoring repertoire. And believe me and believe it or not, it's gonna be a show, baby. Showtime Slim, baby. Let's go.
For the record, I'm not imitating what Les is doing, which is the Isaiah Evans thing. I'm just furrowing my brow in like I should have taken him off the board so that way Les, but he would have talked about him anyway. I wouldn't.
Yeah, you act like I need an excuse to
There
talk
was
about
no way
Duke
I was going
players.
to win that one, folks. I'm sorry about that, but
Real quick, before you continue, we got to ask the viewers: is the Showtime Slim three fingers over the face celebration top five celebration in college basketball? Let us know in the comments.
oh my god, you can't start that yet. You have to at least wait until the regular season.
No, he already done it. He already brought it out.
There's no hope for this podcast, people. I'm terribly sorry. I'm terribly sorry, folks. He's gonna do that for the next 5 years, and I'm gonna be like 40 doing this podcast, and I'm just gonna turn on the screen, and the only thing will be Les doing that. I can't even do it. He's gonna be doing that for like the next 20 years.
I'll switch it. I'll switch it up. Use both hands with it.
Oh my god! Don't no. It's like in that scene from Monsters Inc. where they're doing the training and you scary feet, scary feet, scary feet. Now do the scary
Question,
feet.
question, did you see the Duke game against Boston College where Isaiah Evans got hot and he starts taunting the crowd?
No.
It's the funniest thing ever because of course he's doing the celebration, but then after like the second and third one, he's just like after he's doing the celebration, he's looking at the crowd. He's
Like, dude, it's Boston College. Come on, man.
no, but they were talking. Apparently, they were talking at him like
Yeah, that's
hard.
Carolina, man. It's Boston College.
I mean, again, I mean, if you're a fan base and you're talking trash to the players, anybody could get it. Which, by the way, I saw the clip that went viral about Tyrese Proctor talking to some of those Louisville fans.
Yeah, that was weird.
No, but it was like, and it was funny. It's because like even Louisville fans in the comments were like, "I actually don't blame Proctor at all. Leave that man alone."
No, I don't blame people at all. I don't blame athletes at all for that 'cause it's a miracle like nobody ever gets punched
People
for
forget like Tyrese Proctor. He's like, I mean, he's an Aussie with an attitude for sure.
oh yeah.
Like you don't
I mean,
want
any
that's not a
Division
guy
One
you want to talk
athlete,
trash to.
talking trash to any Division One athlete, regardless of sport, as a fan, is probably an invitation to like at least leave with a black eye.
Right. And then,
Oh,
of course, I was at that game too with my nephew. And then we also heard the student section chanting overrated at Cooper Flag. And my nephew, who is a Louisville fan, looked at me and goes, "Can we not do that? Like, don't y'all watch those Ball is Life videos? Every time the student section chants overrated, the player goes for like 40. And of course, Cooper Flag had 20 and 12. So, I mean, like, still really good game. And of course, that
mixtapes
putback
imitate
dunk heard
life.
around the world.
Yeah, mixtapes imitate life. I guess I don't know.
I mean, like the title, Ball is Life. So, I mean, I guess ball does imitate life.
It's true. Ball,
It's all about how you look. It's all about
I
perspective
ball,
there.
therefore I am.
Exactly. That's all about perspective, my friend.
Right, well, what's the next question?
Oh, you got me sidetracked.
Well,
Okay,
doing a
what was
celebration.
of looking at these list of guys that decided to come back? What do you think was the most surprising?
The most surprising one. That's a good question, actually. I was honestly surprised at Milos Uzan coming back, but I'm very glad he did. I thought that guy was going to ride that wave of like playing defense. Kelvin Sampson, Houston in the national championship game, probably should have won the national championship. But I think that's probably the reason why he came back. I thought that was going to be the guy who was going to come through and really stay in the draft. You know, use that like defensive prowess to prove that like he had done something, was a good player, one of those defensive stoppers that you need on the wing in the NBA today. So when I saw he came back, I was kind of surprised. But I mean, Houston is freaking loaded, man. I actually think for the first time, like maybe ever, we could end up with a repeat national championship game just because of how deep Houston and Florida are. Because they didn't stop losing guys, they were like, no, let's go out and get even more guys. So much so that Pop Isaacs, who was one of the guys they
I
got
was
to
just about
come
to
in and
bring that up.
replace
Yeah,
him, he leaves because Uzan comes back, and it's like, damn. Carter Knox was also a big surprise to me. I know Arkansas kind of had a, but you know what else can you say about like a lot of these young Calipari teams? Is like they had kind of a disappointing year because we all expect them to like win the national championship, and they just beat like a 1 seed and did all of this and yada yada, 2 seed and did all this yada yada. But it's always interesting to me when like guys who are associated with John Calipari come back because not just because it goes against the whole one and done thing, but just because it's always interesting to see what they're going to do in year number two because generally when a guy comes back to Calipari, that second year is something really special. So Milos Uzan was probably the most surprising. Then I was followed it up with Carter Knox. Both really big moves, obviously. Very happy for the both of those guys. Excited to see what Carter Knox does in a somewhat depleted but still incredibly talented Arkansas team. And I mean Milos Uzan. I mean when he's back in Houston, blah, they're just going to be Houston's just going to be really good. What else can you say? Houston's just going to be really good.
you know that could be a little bit of foreshadowing for our college basketball cap or no cap once we get closer to the start of the season.
It
But
will be.
because with you bringing up Milos Uzan and the fact that Pop Isaacs transferred to Texas A&M, I mean that actually begs a really good question that we haven't talked about a lot on this podcast. As much as we talk about the portal, Texas A&M has not been a team that we have talked about a lot, but is quietly kind of making some noise.
Yeah,
Bucky McMillan stepping in year one, and he's making some noise through the portal. Of course, with Milos Uzan coming back to Houston, that causes Pop Isaacs to go and transfer to Texas A&M. Mackenzie Mbako, a guy you've watched play,
yeah.
is now playing for Texas A&M. Rylan Griffin, the former Alabama and Kansas player, is now transferring to Texas A&M.
Federico.
Mm-hmm. Federico.
The
Yeah.
one, and I'll just interject here. The wild thing to me about Texas A&M too.
Zach Clements, too. That's another name I was going to throw in there.
Oh, I forgot about Zach Clemens too. The weird thing about Texas A&M to me too is how they've done it with like because they have like if you would have asked me this question a month ago, where like all the portal signings were popping off, I would have been like, damn, Bucky McMillan, man, I don't know if you should have taken that job. You're up a creek here. The SEC's tough. You've got like your best player is Mackenzie Mbako, who he's good. Never lived up to the expectation. Never really lived up to what we thought he could do. But new coach, new place. Texas A&M has really just done this in like the last month
Hmm.
to get all these players together who are like actual known names who have played roles on pretty good teams, and now they're just getting together and now they're making a run. And it's interesting. We think of the portal as like, once you get past what is it like April, portal's done. All the good players are gone. This, that, and the other thing. And it's like no, Gonzaga. They go out and get Grant Canyon's. I forget his name. He's the guy with three names. But they went out and got themselves their point guard for next season. Uh, A&M gets Pop Isaacs, Frederick Federico late. I mean, you can make moves in the portal late in the game and still end up being pretty successful. And I think that Texas A&M is a prime example of that. So never forget that even though we sleep in May, things still happen.
That's right. With my most surprising player to come back to college was actually Boogie Flan, especially with the stigma, especially right now with the NBA playoffs we have going on, with the reputation that Calipari guards and the developing he does putting guards into the NBA. Boogie Flan was like in prime position to be that next guard. And actually, I thought when healthy had a really good season at Arkansas this past year. But of course, he decides to come back and then transfers to Florida, of course. So I was a little surprised by that. So that's why I would think Boogie Flan would be my top player that I was the most surprised to hear was coming back to school.
We're both surprised by Calipari players coming back, but
I know.
that's just natural, folks. That's just how it is. When
I
like,
know we're no, it's something we're not used to.
especially since the one and done era's like prime is coming to an end, that's going to be like an adjustment.
Only like the best of the best are going to be one and done now.
Yeah, because of NIL and because of development, it's wild, and international players too. We might harp on that a little bit more as we carry on, but as time continues. But Les, do you have any other? What's your next? What is our next topic of discussion here?
Next topic of discussion is I'm looking at, one of the list here from Jonathan Giovanni for the NBA Draft Express. He was ranking the players that decided to come back to school where they would have gone in the NBA draft. I was a little surprised to see Yaxel Landenborg at, the highest ranked player that decided to come back to college. So, kind of Matt, talk about the player that, Michigan is getting with Yaxel Landenborg.
Yeah. Oh God. When this transfer portal, when that move happened in the portal, I was kind of taken aback, mostly because Michigan got like the best player in the portal when that happened. I'm not gonna lie. I have been big on this guy for years. If you remember, I've kind of always had a thing about UAB down
Hmm.
in the American Athletic. They had a down season last year, not gonna lie. But this guy, Axel Landenberg, power forward type guy, absolutely amazing ball player with a lot of like I guess this crappy word here that everyone uses would be intangibles. But this dude is just the kind of player who is like made to be in the Big Ten and may even be a little bit better than other players in the Big Ten, be just because of his size and what he can do. So I mean, when Michigan gets this guy, I remember watching him play against Memphis, holding his own against like all the players they had. I mean, this dude is like a one man wrecking machine. And I think in the Big Ten, that kind of play is going to be encouraged more, even if it doesn't work out in the NCAA tournament, which who knows? This guy is that good. I mean, this dude, I don't even know if I can accurately describe the way this guy could elevate Michigan. Because, we were all counting on Purdue, bringing back everybody, getting their 7'3" Jacobson kid back, getting the guys from North Dakota State or South Dakota State that they did to fill out that roster. But Michigan is up there too. Michigan and Purdue are probably going to be like 1-2 all year in the Big Ten. And a big part of that is Yaxel Landenberg. And yeah, I know Danny Wolf stayed in the draft as he should have. But getting Yaxel Landenberg from UAB is going to be a huge move that I think I would honestly not be surprised with. As much as we talked about Pettiford and some of these other guys coming in, these superstar freshmen coming in, if when all is said and done, if we're talking about Yaxel Landenberg as player of the year, I think he has that kind of potential. And we know that Dusty May's got like a very, very good offensive system. So Yaxel Landenberg, I think, elevates Michigan to at least a top 5 team in the preseason poll. He's that good buy stock now if you're not sure.
If as we talk about some of the best players that have decided to come back to college basketball, one of the biggest names that decided that it was returning to college basketball, of course, was PJ Haggerty. And to be honest, Matt, I couldn't decide what I was more surprised by, the fact that he actually came back to college because I thought I see a very good player in PJ Haggerty, or the fact that he not only came back, but he's transferring from Memphis into Kansas State. So, were you surprised by any of those two moves right there?
Not entirely, because and you don't want to talk like this because you don't know the situation, you don't know the player, you don't know their family. But like all of like those message boards and Twitter accounts with the anon info were talking about the massive bidding war that was going on and how much money PJ Haggerty's, I don't know, people, agents, I don't know what they're called, and I don't want to defame anybody, how much money that camp wanted. And then out of nowhere, Darian Williams gets that what's unprecedented like seventh year of eligibility
Hmm.
coming out of Texas Tech and goes to the Wolfpack, and then it opens up the path for Jerome Tang to do his thing, kind of like what we've talked about with Texas A&M, make a very impactful late portal move to get PJ Haggerty, kind of like you did with Coleman Hawkins last year.
Right. Oh, that's good pull. Good pull.
But I expect this one to be much more impactful than Coleman Hawkins, to be
Oh,
honest.
for
No,
sure.
no shade to Coleman Hawkins, his camp, his people, but PJ Haggerty, I think, could elevate. I almost said Texas, Kansas State.
Texas, Kansas State.
Texas,
That's a heck of a college right there.
wouldn't that actually be Oklahoma? I'm sorry.
Oh,
PJ Haggerty, I think, has a chance to elevate Kansas State, and I need to evaluate the rest of their roster, and we'll get to that later when we do our the capping and no capping later in the year. But PJ Haggerty, I think, is a good enough player, especially after watching Memphis last year, because Memphis went to the AAC, didn't really have an impressive tournament, was one of the few teams that got upset. We forget how good they actually were to start last season with those big upset wins in Maui, with the way they played. Who did they go into Virginia Tech? I think it was. Oh,
hmm.
Clemson was Clemson, and playing like at 11 o'clock and winning that game. We forget how good Memphis started the year because they petered off. I can't lie, because when you go to the AAC, it's a bit of a downgrade from the field of the Maui Invitational. So I think we're kind of forgetting how good PJ Haggerty was to start. But I think Jerome Tang made the solid move there, and I think Will Wade, because we have to talk about Will Wade,
It's a
made the
Will
move,
Wade takeover.
made the move that he needed to make because he obviously really wants a veteran, experienced team over at NC State with the guys he's been getting, and I think Darian Williams fit that mold for him a little better than PJ Haggerty did. But PJ Haggerty is going to be just fine at good old Manhattan, Kansas, and I think that and like I said, he's going to be much more impactful than even Coleman Hawkins was. That's a very, very important move for Jerome Tang as he's trying to, there were some questions about that job performance last year. I think he's trying to put him to rest as quickly as he can with PJ Haggerty at the helm.
Well, and it's funny though because even if the other late additions from Jerome Tang, in the transfer portal don't work out, the good news for Jerome Tang is that PJ Haggerty is used to putting the team on his back. He pretty much had to do it all year in Memphis last year, so I don't see where this is going to be any different. But
And
of course,
Memphis, like I said, it's like you said, Memphis, they petered out. So I think that's not going to be as big of a problem at Kansas State as it was at Memphis.
am I crazy to believe this? But it feels like, Jerome Tang after like the run a couple years ago with Kansas State, it just seemed like his stock was so high as a coach, and now it's just kind of like faltered down a little bit.
Yeah, it's
It's
been
it's like
it's
a
been a
roller
weird
coaster.
ride. It's been a weird ride in Manhattan. Yeah. Les, I want to take an opportunity here to maybe grab control of the show because
Absolutely, go ahead.
just for a brief moment or two, because we talk about winners and losers a lot on this podcast,
Right.
and it's like I said at the start of this show, it's hard to pick losers in a situation like this because the players who went back to school, a lot of them are going back to just loaded situations, or they're going to get NIL. The team and the ones who stay in the draft, they're going to get a chance to live their lifelong dream and get paid in the process. A lot of the programs who lost guys are just already loaded. They're going to be fine. But there is one loser that I want to talk about because it's just an example of how like one dream can totally like affect the upcoming season. And that that goes all the way to the Big Ten and then an unusual part of the Big Ten, Happy Valley, to talk about basketball because Yannick Koda Niederhauser, very good player for Penn State, stayed in the draft. Penn State did everything they could to keep this guy out of the transfer portal. He goes to the combine and becomes a superstar at the combine, like incredible rising stock. And he stays in. And man, it's hard for me to see a way where Penn State wins like 10 conference games next year, if that. That's one of those moves where it's the dark side of everything. Is that's just a debilitating blow. It's
Hmm.
debilitating. And you remember like when they hired Mike Rhodes, I was like, I like Mike Rhodes, but I'd really like to see the Big Ten take a step away from like, just straight up defensive minded guys. And I love Dace Ball. I've always loved Dace Baldwin. And we're entering, that first year was magical with Penn State. But ever since Shrewsbury left, and it's all kind of been downhill, and now Penn State is really up against it. And I mean, I really want to see like Ace Baldwin succeed at Penn State because I really have always loved that guy. And while I was dubious of the Mike Rhodes hire, I don't even know if this is his fault, man. I mean, well, when you lose a guy as impactful as Yannick Conan Niederhauser to the draft, it's just very hard to reboot. And like we said, there are ways you can get guys in the portal later on. But this is one of those situations where it's like, Frederick Federico's already gone. Who's left? You may be with some slim pickings here. And Penn State's roster is already kind of lackluster. And you lose a guy like that, a guy who really, I think, combined with Ace Baldwin, was set up to maybe not, be a massive success, but at least good enough to keep Penn State in the race for the Big Ten tournament. And now it's just like, does this team win 9 conference games next year?
Right.
It's a tough road to hoe. That's like the only team that sticks out to me as like being a loser in this whole situation. But like we said, the good news is you can go out, you can make some late adjustments, and you could pull through okay. It may not be the season you want, but you can go out there, upset some people, win some games, have a good time.
I think that's the downside of, a story like this. As we talk about the good surprise and the rich getting richer with players that we maybe expected to go pro but decided to come back. For every one of those players, there's a player that goes to the NBA Combine, and maybe you're expecting him to possibly come back. Maybe he needs another year, but then he goes to the workouts and he impresses the scouts and decides to stay in. So that's the side of this that I think is the most detrimental to a team like, Penn State, a guy that
Yeah.
has, needs all that the help they can get. Now, obviously, like I'm not as at my fan base, like I'm not on the suffering end of this at all. I'm a Duke fan. I mean, let's be real about it. We re-up and reload. But we went through, on a much lesser scale, a similar situation this offseason with Cedric Howard. He was supposed to be one of our big portal gets this offseason, and then he goes to the combine, tests the waters, and scouts like are impressed with, his combination of his length and his shooting ability and all that stuff. And I mean, and then of course Shire kind of last minute went out and recruited Demay Sarr and Sebastian Wilkins, which, like I
Uh-huh.
said, we're not struggling. Yeah, we're not hurting by any means of this, but no, I mean, it just goes to show, like for every player that benefits a team by surprising them and coming back, there's always that player that impresses the scouts and stays in that maybe you're expecting to
Right.
come back. But yeah,
And
no,
it's also incredible to me, like when I look at these lists and they list the losers, where it's like Kansas lost because they didn't. RJ Luis stayed in. It's like, yeah, but Melvin Council is coming back. He's going
hmm
to Kansas. Kansas is going to be just fine. They've got Flory Bedenga. They've got lots of things. They've got all these guys coming in. Kansas is going to be fine. Or people like, oh well, BYU lost, and it's like, because yeah, Igor Damin is a great player. He did what I thought he was going to do,
they
but they
literally
got
have AJ
AJ
Davanza coming
Vansa
in. Yeah,
coming
they
in.
have AJ Davanza coming in. Like, what are you talking about?
It's not like the BYU is some poor program or Kansas is some poor program like with no
Oh,
basketball heritage who's just being thrown by the
oh,
wayside.
they got Rob Wright to transfer too.
Oh well, yeah, they're doomed. They're
Oh, I know. Like they're screwed, I guess.
definitely a loser, and it's like no, 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 no. They don't lose. Penn State loses because they lost a good player. People are like, well, Georgia lost, and it's like, well, Asa Newell was gone anyway. If you thought Asa Newell was coming back, I would have. There's a bridge I'd like to sell you. That guy is too talented to stay around for too long.
Now, we didn't, Matt, real quick, this actually makes me
Yeah, go
think
ahead.
like we didn't plan for this question, but I want to see your opinion. You know, what's funny is, we talk about BYU coaches, BYU recruiting right now with this segment of the podcast. And I look at the job that Kevin Young's doing through the recruiting cycles at BYU. And what's impressive about it is that literally the coach before Kevin Young, Mark Pope, was known as a coach who was doing the most with the least talent. And now you look at Mark Pope, what he's doing at Kentucky, and he's been able to bring in all these players through the portal. He's getting good recruited classes, so far in his early Kentucky coaching career.
Yep.
So is it safe to ask the question that if Kevin Young eventually wants to upgrade and go to maybe a more established college basketball brand, is it fair to assume that those recruiting classes would be absolutely insane? If he's getting guys like Igor Dimon and AJ Dabansa at BYU, imagine what he could do at like a Kansas.
Well, you do have a point there, Les. But here's the thing about this is another example of how the new era is changing things. BYU is not a typical school. Let's be honest.
Mm-hmm.
BYU has the backing of the whole freaking Church of Latter-day Saints. There is no lack of NIL. You've got every businessman who went to BYU because there's only really BYU. It's true that if you went to Kansas, you could get better players because you're at Kansas. But BYU, I think, has made no reservations about the fact they're trying to get to that level now that they can use this NIL money to
Mm-hmm.
get these guys in. So if you're Kevin Young, it's tempting to get that prestige job. I would agree. Yes, Kansas, Indiana, they come calling in a few years. Maybe Darian DeVere doesn't work out, but BYU, I mean, it's nothing to shake a stick at. You've got the backing of a whole entire church organization that, as far as I know, doesn't pay taxes because, that's not what we do in the United States. You've got every Mormon businessman giving you their NIL money. You can do whatever you want there because you have like an endless pool of money because it's not like, even in Indiana where you have the businessmen who went to Purdue, the businessmen who went to Indiana, et cetera, et cetera. They're all trying to offset each other. There is just BYU. And BYU is going to give you all the money you need in the world to the point where it may even be a pay cut for some of these guys to go to Kansas where you're being watched by, who knows, the government, the state regulatory board, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a fair question to ask. Don't get me wrong.
Mm-hmm.
But it comes down to, do you want the prestige job or do you want the money? And I don't know Kevin Young. I don't know what's in his heart. I don't know what's in his soul. But I think either way he picked, he'd be a winner.
Real quick, before timer runs out, as always, like and subscribe to the Less is More Sports YouTube and Spotify channel. Be sure to follow our social media pages on Facebook, Twitter, and Threads. That's at Less is More Sports. And be sure to follow the SideQuest on TikTok. That's BatBeansDad018. Just in time before we beat the timer.
We did beat the timer.
Oh, yeah, one more thing.
Oh, for God's sake. This podcast is dumb.
Tingling on the inside, gonna have a good time. Looking at the sunshine, feeling like a gold mine. I know we'll be alright.